Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Evdokimov, and today we are talking about the principles of investing in tokens, cryptocurrency, and blockchain startups. In today's topic, we'll be covering the analysis and principles that should be used in my ICO startup, in order to help us make the right decision as to whether to invest in a startup or not. Also, I would like to outline a set of solutions that are often used when conducting an ICO. We will cover some aspects of marketing, legal, and technological foundation that help the ICO function. Each one of these aspects has its own specifics. A detailed analysis of what is going on within the ICO structure would help us make the right decision about a startup in many ways. At the very least, it would allow us to see if a particular ICO is destined to fail, if it doesn't comply with the basic principles for a successful startup. I would like to start with the legal components of an ICO. Why is this very important? Because if we find any risk factors with an ICO, they will directly affect the startup itself. And if we are token holders of this startup or are planning to be, we need to understand that the safety of a startup and its ability to grow further are both very important. If a startup is stable from the legal standpoint, then its user base will grow, and therefore its profits and the overall token economy will increase. That's why we need to see how an ICO startup is being implemented. An ICO is like thin ice from the regulatory point of view, so we always need to pay attention to the risk factors and any potential problems that may arise. So, what kind of problems are we talking about and what can cause these problems? Well, if a regulator indicated that some of the ICO's actions were taken illegally, or if some of the startup services can't operate from a legal perspective, then this situation will lead to the utility token being labeled as a security risk token. As a result, the token will be delisted from the cryptocurrency market from the exchanges. If the token is delisted, it decreases chances to sell this token or use it in any other way. This is why it is important to analyze and understand the legal aspect of an ICO startup. So how are we going to analyze the legal component of an ICO? First of all, we need to look at the basic legal principles that require for a startup to follow certain rules and regulations. In other words, the startup must pass the following tests: the Howey test, the family resemblance test, as well as the risk capital test. These consist of 18 questions that need to be answered by the startup. Not just in this particular case, but these questions should be asked when evaluating any startup. Of course, it's not your job to do as an investor, but rather of a dedicated legal team, which worked on the documents for this startup and prepping its products for the market. Still, you should check how well the legal team has done its job. There is no need for a deep examination, but an overall check needs to be done. What should we check for? Any startup needs to comply with basic legal principles. Beginning with the basics, when a startup positions its tokens as utility, it expects it to be listed on the cryptocurrency market. The token is then supposed to function as a utility and not as a share. As mentioned before, it should pass the Howey test and should not have any shared risks and shared profits. Shared profits are very simple to understand. The token of the startup cannot be used for distribution of the company's profits proportionally to the amount of tokens owned by the company. If the token brings passive income, then in this case, the startup distributes profits directly and it works just like shares. And what do shares allow? They allow to receive equal profit, they allow to vote, and they allow to own assets proportional to the amount of shares. If the token does not have these traits, then it does not have to share profits. We have to pay attention to the foundation of the token economy. If the token economy is built in such a way that makes the token the means to pay for the product offered by a startup, as well as the services to cover success fees or gas, then everything is good. That is, the token is the ultimate utility and will face no problems. The second aspect is shared risks. Shared risk is the distribution of risk according to the amount of owned assets. There is a pretty simple method that a startup has to pass and implement. First of all, it refers to utilizing escrow services during an ICO until token can be utilized. If we are examining a startup that has a product which has already been implemented and tokens can be used right after an ICO, and we should prefer startups like this, then it is important that a startup does not produce shared risks, meaning a startup uses escrow where the funds are held until the tokens are released. Tokens are released only when they are ready to be utilized, and at that moment, the money is also released from escrow. In other words, for the funds to be released from escrow, the tokens need to be distributed and ready to be utilized. This point is very important. If we can eliminate the shared risks and the shared profits aspects of an ICO, then we have an ideal startup. This just eliminates basic issues. You can always analyze a startup much deeper than what we covered here. Safety of a startup from a legal perspective is important to look closely into. That's why when making an investment decision, you should always analyze all aspects of a startup. Now let's talk about the marketing aspect of a startup. Why am I even paying attention to how a startup does its marketing during an ICO? Well, usually the marketing campaign that is conducted during an ICO is the highlight of the startup's entire experience, probably even in all of its existence. There is also the fact that besides how the fundraising of the startup is conducted, the ICO needs advertising in order to acquire users. The more users a startup has, the more is the turnover of funds, and the higher the token economy. Also, the value of tokens is higher with that. Therefore, the marketing of an ICO needs to be analyzed as well. Whenever I am asked to give an example, I use the marketing campaign of the ICO box itself, which is one of my companies. At the time when we started our ICO, we had about 10 requests per day to conduct ICOs from other companies. By the time we were ending our ICO, we had more than 100 requests a day from other companies. As you can see, user acquisition during our ICO played a huge role and it brought us big profit. Now, as for the brand recognition in general, we always try for the audiences representing potential token holders and product users to cross paths. This is also very important. A good marketing campaign during an ICO is the guarantee of good results. It is important to understand that if a startup handled marketing well during an ICO, it will successfully handle marketing after the ICO is over. What is our main goal here? Our main goal is to see a startup grow healthy, increase its user base and turnover over time, and as a result, increase the overall token economy. So here we have an important example of how a startup functions during an ICO, and we can of course analyze the following example. What do you analyze first? You should analyze the number of articles a startup has about it in some publications. If these articles are in top crypto media and top business media, then the startup can solve the task of marketing by doing so. You should check to see how often you encounter advertising of a particular startup on the internet. You should also make sure the startup's advertisement strategy is built correctly. Are they using the right targeting for their advertising campaign? Are they advertising through social media? Can it avoid restrictions set against blockchain and ICOs? Does it provide specialized landing pages to create user acquisition services or not? These are some good examples that demonstrate what a good advertisement campaign of an ICO looks like. Again, please pay attention how the articles are published. If the startup is mentioned through sponsored content that is marked as paid advertisement, then its media buying team is doing a great job. On the contrary, if the startup's articles are published as news and they introduce the product, then you can get feedback in return and can evaluate how interesting the product is in itself. This allows you to see how well the PR team is functioning. You need to understand that an ICO is just the beginning of the journey, the first step in the life of the business. This initial step allows you to assess the competence of the startup's team. That's why I advise you to see how startup is constructed and how they work things out with marketing. Hopefully it all aligns and works well. Now let's move on to another aspect, the aspect of technology, as it also plays a significant role. If we are examining a scenario where there are still no MVP, that is to say a startup is planning to launch services after the ICO is completed, which is very possible, as a ready service is not always available at the time of the ICO. Technology determines a few important factors. Besides a startup's ability to develop products, programs, and services, the technology helps us understand how to solve the question of safety. This relates to the safety of both token holders during the sale and users after the services are launched. Technology helps us with everything that has to do with how well ICO will be conducted. We already noted that the more investors there are, the more people work on the project and think about its success as a startup. To sum it up, we always have to assess the safety, possibility of listing, and the opportunity to work with technology. As it regards to technology, we need to see how the token is released. There are many blockchains in existence already these days, and as a result, there are many alternatives a startup can choose from. I always advise a startup to release its tokens on Ethereum as a standard. This action makes it easier to list the token on the cryptocurrency market. It also provides the safety of the blockchain service itself and its stability. Please make sure that at least during the ICO, the token is released on Ethereum. If a startup uses its own blockchain consequently and it needs to launch another internal token, there are exchange mechanisms that exist to assist with that. Note that even when a blockchain startup conducts an ICO, it uses Ethereum technology and an Ethereum smart contract. That's why in the case of listing the token and in case of its safety, there are important aspects we need to pay close attention to. Now the next question is how the book building platform is implemented. Does it accept enough currency? How is the token issued? And so on. Pay attention to whether a startup took an easy route and conducted an ICO on Ethereum technology directly on a smart contract and did not conduct it with an additional book-building platform. This can reflect poorly on the fundraising side. I know there are other contrary examples, but nevertheless, if a startup nominates its token in Ethereum, and if you can buy the token only through Ethereum, it usually leads to serious difficulties. Why? Because the currency fluctuates and therefore users will often leave negative comments on their social media pages. This often leads to a limited number of investors. All of these aspects need to be noted. Let me repeat this again. The process of conducting a full ICO, the advisors, who are the core team players, and the analysis of the team members themselves are all very important. Because when we are talking about an accomplished technology goal, accomplished basic principles, an accomplished marketing campaign, PR, traffic, and media buying, it's all great. But we most importantly need to analyze the core team members and advisors of the startup. Based on these factors, we need to make an informed decision on whether or not a startup will be successful after the ICO is finished and the startup is launched in the real world. Thank you very much for your attention. Next time our video topic will be on looking at a particular example of an ICO. We will start from the beginning of the whole chain of events which takes place within an ICO. Also, we will touch on a whole set of questions related to documentation that any startup needs to provide for investors to make an informed decision. We will also go over the fact that you as an investor have the right to request from a startup, as well as the documentation itself that we will analyze. Thank you very much for your attention. Note that at the bottom of this video there is a link to my website where you can find my contact info. Feel free to contact me to receive information about token investments, how to structure an ICO for the purpose of receiving sufficient funding, and with any other questions you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.